Hello, my name is Charlotte Horlick and I'm reader in Korean art history at SOAS in London. My area of specialisms include Korean visual and material culture from pre-modern to modern times, on which I have lectured and published widely. Today's lecture is the 7th of 8 lectures on art from the end of the Joseon Dynasty to the Korean Empire, spanning the late 19th and early 20th century. Visual culture from this period has often been interpreted as representing an intermediary state in the so-called modernization of Korean art. The lectures that we have prepared for you aim to provide further insight into understanding the dynamic processes of change during this period. You will be introduced to a wide range of material, from artifacts such as paintings and ceramics to exemplars of modern architecture, as a way to investigate the cultural environment of this formative stage in Korean modern history. The lecture focuses on the collecting and exhibition of art in Korea in the opening decades of the 20th century. During this period, the collecting and exhibition of art in Korea underwent significant changes impacted by both internal developments and external pressures, notably by the Japanese colonial rule. During the Joseon Dynasty and the Joseon Empire, art in Korea was primarily patronized by the royal court and the Yangban upper class. However, the annexation of Korea by Japan in 1910 brought significant changes. Japanese authorities promoted their own cultural agenda, influencing the ways in which Korean art was collected and exhibited. In Seoul, the establishment of institutions like the Prince E Household Museum in 1908 and the Government General Museum of Korea in 1915, now the National Museum of Korea, marked a shift towards institutionalized collecting and exhibition practices. As in the case of Europe, the museums played a critical role enabling access to cultural heritage, serving as custodians of history, art, and culture. Thus, for the first time ever, Korean people from all social classes and economic backgrounds were able to see important cultural treasures and learn more about their own cultural heritage. The museums also played a crucial role in presenting traditional Korean art to the increasing number of foreigners who lived and traveled in Korea during this time. The establishment of museums in Korea is closely linked with the emerging interest in collecting of Korean art by different individuals, notably the Japanese, the North Americans, and the Europeans, signaling the formation of some of the first major private collections of Korean art outside the Korean peninsula. Many of the objects they purchased later ended up in public museums, signifying how the public and private spheres of the appreciation, study, and acquisition of art are closely entwined. The founding of museums and the emergence of the art market in Korea in the opening decades of the 20th century were not sudden developments. They were rooted in long-standing local traditions centered on the appreciation and display of art, led by members of the royal family and the Yangban elite class. In this session, we will explore these early practices in more detail. In particular, we will look at which kinds of art was collected by the Korean elite in the Joseon Dynasty and how such art was appreciated and displayed. In my first lecture, I explained that the rulers of the Joseon Dynasty placed much emphasis on scholarly pursuits, among them calligraphy and painting. The reason being that since ancient times, such activities were considered the highest form of art. This belief entered Korea from China. In traditional East Asian culture, calligraphy is not only about writing, it is also an integrated art form that combines literacy, art, philosophy, and poetry. From this perspective, calligraphy may be regarded as a manifestation of the mind. In Western art, words and images are often treated as different modes of communication. But in East Asia, painting is closely associated with calligraphy mainly because the two art forms share the same materials and require the same means of application. In other words, both calligraphy and painting relies on the application of black ink applied with a brush. From an early age, scholars were trained in the art of handwriting, i.e. calligraphy, and they used calligraphic brushstrokes in their paintings. As adults, scholars continued to practice both calligraphy and painting, as such activities were regarded as suitable vehicles of self-expression. Moreover, they aided learning and thus furthered the Confucian scholars' pursuit of knowledge. In the Joseon dynasty, many kings and scholar officials of the Yangban class produced noteworthy exemplars of calligraphy and painting. One of the most well-known examples of this is Yi Yong, better known as Prince Anpyeong. Born in 1418, he was the third son of King Sejong. Many of you will be familiar with King Sejong. He is regarded as one of the greatest kings of the Joseon dynasty due to his many achievements. Among them was his invention of Hangul, the Korean phonetic script. Here you see a statue of King Sejong, positioned in the center of Seoul in front of Gyeongbokgung Palace. His title, Sejong Daewang, meaning Great King Sejong, is written in Hangul on the plinth. Since early times, works of art were exchanged between the ruling elite in China, Korea, and Japan, often during diplomatic missions and other official activities. Such artworks were much treasured, and is indicated by them being included in royal and imperial collections. In the Joseon dynasty, one of the earliest known art collections was that owned by Prince Anpyeong. The prince was much invested in the arts, not least since he himself was talented in producing the three highest art forms of his time, namely poetry, calligraphy, and painting, earning him the title of Three Excellences. Moreover, during his short life, he succeeded in building the largest collection of Chinese painting and calligraphy in Joseon, Korea. Unfortunately, Prince Anpyeong's painting collection has not survived till today, but luckily its content is known since the Yangban scholar Shin Suk-ju itemized the collection in a document called Commentaries on Painting that was written in 1445. The collection is noteworthy for its large number of Chinese calligraphy and paintings from the Tang, Sung, and Yuan dynasties. Among the more than 200 works in his collection were paintings by influential Chinese masters of painting such as Guo Xi, Li Gonglin, and Su Shi. He also collected works by the Korean Yangban painter An Gyeon. The importance of Prince Anpyeong's collecting activities is reflected in paintings by An Gyeon. The painter benefited much from Prince Anpyeong's patronage, not least since he had full access to Prince Anpyeong's painting collection, enabling him to study works by influential Chinese painters in detail. This is evidenced in An Gyeon's painting style, which includes pictorial idioms of Guo Xi and Guo Xi's followers. Over the course of the Joseon dynasty, many Yangban men collected calligraphy and painting by Chinese and Korean masters. Some of the artworks they acquired when traveling in China, others they bought in shops in Seoul. The art market at Kwangdong Bridge in central Seoul was particularly well known as a place where such items could be bought. It was here that people purchased calligraphy, paintings, books, and various types of antiques, many of them imported from China. The latter included ceramics, jades, and bronzes. Some such objects were much sought after for their value as rare and exotic objects. However, conspicuous spending was frowned upon by the Joseon Confucian rulers, creating a moral dilemma for many. Some Yangban argued that attachment to worldly possessions would undermine righteous thinking. Despite this, many enjoyed collecting books and paintings, among other objects. They proudly stored these artifacts in purpose-built pavilions and appreciated them in the company of friends. Aware of the criticism directed against lavish spending on luxury goods, they defended their acquisition activities by arguing that the enjoyment of special items was good for the soul and advanced the mind. The consumption of both books and Chinese antiques among the Yangban literati and Chungin intellectuals is suggested in chekkado, also called chekkori, which are illustrations of books and things typically presented in the format of folding screens, where they are arranged on shelves flanked by brushes and ink sticks, ancient bronzes, fruits, and flowering plants, and various types of exotic items such as pocket watches. Several such screens are now in museum collections where you can see them. The fact that many chekkado were painted by court artists suggests that they were widely used at the royal court as well. It is said that King Jeongjo even replaced the traditional screen of mountains, which are mentioned to you in an earlier lecture, behind his throne with a chekkado, stating, "Although I love to read, I often have no time due to my many duties. At such times I find solace in looking at the chekkado." This love of books was consistent throughout the Joseon royal family and extended to the common people. The six-fold screen you see here is in the collection of the National Palace Museum in Seoul. It depicts shelves full of items valued by the scholar. It is therefore no coincidence that most of the items on the shelves are books, due to the high value Yangban scholars placed on studying. There are many records saying that the items diplomats frequently requested from China were books and maps. In this screen, placed between the books are various treasured items. For example, on the bottom of the second shelf from the left is likely an antique bronze incense burner. On the shelf to its right is a ceramic bowl with 2 pomegranates. Part of one of the fruits has been cut away to reveal the seeds inside. The keenness to show the seeds is likely because pomegranate were considered to be auspicious, as their many seeds denoted plenitude. Many chekkori paintings do not carry the signatories of the maker, making it very difficult to ascertain who painted them and when. For this reason, the painting you see here is very special. It is in the collection of the National Museum of Korea in Seoul. The screen was painted by Lee Hyung-rok. He was a court painter in the Towaso, the bureau painting, meaning that he was employed by the Lee royal family to produce paintings used by the royal court. For example, he participated in the painting of King Cheoljong's royal portrait in 1852 and 1861. Additionally, from 1833 to 1863, he served for 30 years as a designated painter in the Kyujanggak, the royal library, where he was repeatedly awarded honorary titles given to top painters. This suggests that his skills were exceptional. His strengths as a painter are reflected in his painting, which presents a colorful and yet harmonious composition of a wide variety of items spread over more than 20 shelves. Note that in contrast to the previous painting I showed you from the National Palace Museum, Lee Hyung-rok's painting is complex, as seen as his use of unevenly placed shelves across the folding screen. The result creates multiple vistas and vantage points. Also pay attention to the various items placed on the shelves alongside the books. They are suggestive of the kinds of items that were sought after by the Joseon elite, who valued them for their symbolic, aesthetic, and exotic qualities. For example, in the screen you can see a narcissus flower. Its name uses the character sun, which means immortal, and thus the flower embodies the wish to live a life that is like that of an immortal being. Peacock feathers was another common motif in chekkado, and they symbolize the hope of rising to high official rank, as the peacock, known as Mun-gum, in Korean, was depicted on the chest of a scholar's official robe. Clocks were also rare and valuable items and difficult to come by in everyday life. Thus, even though clocks were not an art object as such, they were still depicted in terracotta paintings due to their value as rare and expensive objects. This lecture has examined collecting activities in the Joseon Dynasty and early 20th century and has questioned which types of objects were popular among different groups of consumers. The Joseon elite coveted calligraphy and painting produced by Chinese and Korean masters, and from the 18th century the trade in such items flourished in Seoul. In contrast, Japanese, American and European consumers of art were especially taken by green glaze ceramics from pre-Joseon times. In the early 20th century, an increasing number of dealers supplied such wares to art collectors. In the next session, we will look in more detail at how the consumption of art was commercialized in the early 20th century.